Today's daf on Friday, daf nun aleph amid aleph. Ahu Yosef, there was an orphan and a girl also coming to him for amalu about food. Amalu helu. So he said, "What do we do with the girl? How do we provide for them? Helu li yosem b'shvili yisayim. Give extra to the yosem, and by giving extra to the yosem, there'll be plenty of food left over the yisayim. So we're not giving metalton directly to the yisayim, we're giving it to the yosem. They can't because they're the heirs. And then from the extra will go to the Yisayma. You yourself said, you yourself ruled later on that the girls only get from land, they don't get from metalklin. And you said that regardless of it's mezayna, whether it's for her ksuva or bein panasa, that only karka is for dowry as well. Even for dowry, you rule not like Shmuel, but you hold that it's only limited to karka that you take to pay for dowry. Amalei said, "You're right. What happens if this boy wanted to hire someone, a maid, to take care of him? You wouldn't give her metalklin to help out the same. You have two benefits. The sister now will do the cooking and help out, and you get that, and plus it's a sister. So why not? Why should she be worse off than a maid? That's what we learned. Whether it's land or whether it's metalklin, we take from there. We feed a woman with abundance, and the girl. Rebbe clearly holds that. For girls, providing for them, we take from metalton as well. So we see that this whole argument had Maraim is actually an argument tonight, because if Shimon Elazar disagrees, he says the chosim shesh lachayis, if it's land, might see lebanos benabonim. If let's say there's a bunch of sons who inherit, and there's a what do you call it? And there's a girl there, and they need to we take from the Yerusha, we give to the girls, they should have what to eat, and for the dowry, ulebanos benabonis, and girls amongst girls. Let's say a bunch only girls, and they all inherit, but the little ones need more help than the other ones. So therefore, even though the older ones took the entire inheritance and so on, and we take away from them, and we divide the entire estate equally. There's no takana to feed the younger ones because they can inherit outright. The older sons and younger sons, we divide inheritance equally, or it doesn't matter what age they are. And also, and if there's girls there, we gave the entire inheritance to the sons if there's a big estate. If there's very little in the estate, we leave it all for the girls, so that they should have what to live on. Until they're 12 and a half years old, or until they get married. And let the sons go out there and collect. The chosish ain't what about metalton? But seeing lebanim and abanim, we give it to the we divide the estate, or lebanim divide by the girls, or lebanim min abanis, and the boys take it from the girls. When it comes to feed, let's say girls and boys, the boys inherit, and you want to feed the girls not from metalton. In other words, Hashem Elazar argues that Rebbe holds that you do not give mezainis from metalton. Generally, the rule is you always follow Rebbe. Here we'll follow Hashem Elazar. Rabbi said, the Rabbi said the halacha is only from land that we use to feed feed the girls and so to the dowry. Not from metalton, bein l'ksuba, bein l'mezayna, bein l'panasa. Whether it's for the ksuba of the mother, whether it's for providing for the girls food, or whether it's for the dowry. Mishnah. So we have a ksuba, and a ksuba is something that you have no choice. You have to give a ksuba $200 to a ksuba, $100 to a almana, and even if you didn't write a ksuba, it's a t'nai bezin that you have to keep. Says the Mishnah. Like Kotzer, look, so you didn't write ksuba, psula gave him a sign. If you didn't write ksuba, the psula nevertheless collects $200. I'm going to collect $100 next to t'nai bezin. Why? Because that is conditional in bezin. Kotzer, in other words, whether you like it or not, you're compelled by it, even if you didn't write a ksuba. What about Kosel Shadnish of Monatach Messiahs? What he did was he gave her, he said, this field is yours, is a lien on this field, and the field Sachakl is worth only 100 zuz. Well, he's supposed to give 200 zuz. He's like Kosel called the Chosnish, even he did not write that all my assets, the lien of all my assets to make sure to pay your ksuba chayiv. Nevertheless, he still owes it a full balance. Tonight, bezin. It's not up to you. It's a tonight bezin. Like cost of law, the next part we learned before that you have to, if she's kidnapped, taken captive, you have to redeem her because, and like we said before, that and that's why, and in this place, she brings in the dowry, you get to keep that. What happened to Kosler? He didn't write in the ksuba, if you will be kidnapped, I will redeem you, I'll take you back as my wife. It doesn't matter if you wrote that. That's a condition of the Chacham you learned before, the 3 takanas. Uve kahenis, or by kahenis, he cannot say, I'll take you back, because once, even if she was raped, he cannot take her back. But he would say, I'll send you back home to your family. Nevertheless, why should tonight bezin? These are all rules that are foisted upon you by a bezin. What about Nishbe is Chai with if she was kidnapped, he has to redeem her. Remember, if he says, if he tries to say, how they get to Uksuvasa, here's your get, she's kidnapped. He says, you know what, here's your divorce, take your Ksuva, take care of yourself, knowing that the ransom amount is far larger than the Ksuva. But Tita's asked to release yourself, and you can't. Why not? Because till now you're benefiting all of these things from the benefits that Chama said before that we give to you. So now suddenly you want to divorce, so we're not going to allow you to divorce. The benefit of that you have to redeem her is because you're eating the produce of her lechasim that she brought in. You've been eating the produce all these years, and now suddenly you tell her go fly a kite, take care of yourself. That's not fair. You already benefit from it. But Laksa, let's say she becomes very ill, you have to pay for her medical bills. But Omar, she says to her, "How they get to ksuvasa here? Take your get, take your ksuva, tirpas atzma, you take care of yourself." That's why you can't. Because here, there's no special takana for medical bills, and therefore he never benefited from it all these years. So he has a right to say, "Look, I know I'm managed to take care of you, and our home is not a hospice, and you can take care of yourself." Cruel as it is, technically, legally, you're allowed to do that. Says when the man, the mayor, who's the author of our Mishnah, it seems to be the mayor. What's going on here? The mayor says, if you ever deviate at all from the laws of Ksuba, it's not a valid Ksuba, and you're not allowed to live together. Living together on a Ksuba is wrong. You're not allowed to live together. You lose a Ksuba, you have to replace it straight away. And our Mishnah clearly says, you gave her $100 or $200, no good. You have to give the full amount. But Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you can write her a ksuba $200, and then you can, she can go ahead and pretend as if she received it. She can pretend as if she received it, and she writes him a receipt for $100. No, really, all he owes her, he says to her, you want me to marry you? I'll marry you, but I'm giving you a ksuba $100. So this is the process, how they do it. He writes her a ksuba $200, she gives him back a receipt for $100, all he owes her is $100. So in other words, he's allowed to deviate. Our Mishnah clearly says you need the full amount. And the Mishnah says that if you give her a property of 100, it's not good enough. Well, Almana, if he could say, but she could write, by Almana, she writes, I accept the 50. Okay, so the author of the Mishnah is Rameir. Amos Sefer, look at the second part. It says, so the first part says he must write, the full 200. He can't get out of it. And then it says, if you wrote a field worth 100 instead of a $200, and didn't write, put a lien on the rest of his property, chayiv had no choice. Who tonight, but it says further in the Mishnah that even if he didn't write in the thing that all my properties are in debt or encumbered to the Ksuva, it's as if it was, because it's tonight bezin. That sounds like Rabbi Yehuda. The Amr says, Rabbi Yehuda said that even if you wrote a contract, a general contract, you forgot to write that there's a lien on the properties, it doesn't matter. It's automatic, because nobody's going to do it without a lien. If you didn't write, it doesn't matter. Rameir says if you didn't explicitly include in the style lien on the properties, it's not included. So this law about if you didn't put a lien on all the properties as if it's there, that follows Rabbi Yehuda. So the beginning is Rameir that you must have the ksuba intact exactly the way it is, and what do you call it? And the second part says to be Rabbi Yehuda. How's that work? What's the story? He holds that if you omitted saying there's a lien on the properties, that's it. There is no lien on the properties. How do I know that? Now we learn. Let's say you found a contract lying on the ground that Reuven owes Shimon $100, and the question is, do you give it back to the borrower, to the lender? What if the borrower admits that yes, this is a true contract? Give it back to the lender. I haven't paid it back yet. Do you give it back to Shimon, the lender? So it depends. If it says that there's a lien on the properties, you cannot get it back, even if Reuven's made it, because maybe there's some kind of a trick going on over here. Bezin will go now to the purchasers. There's a third party involved over here. We can't trust either of them. Maybe there's some deal going on over here that he already paid, but he's going to pay a second time. He wants to get his properties back. So they made this concocted the story. He lost it, gave it back to the lender. He'll collect the second time. He has no money left. They will take it back to the properties that were sold, a while ago to other people. We don't trust anybody because there's a third party involved. But if you omitted mentioning about a lien on the properties, then you can give it back, because the only person who gets hurt is the borrower. If he admits that he still owes the money, what are we worried about? star. So clear the mayor holds that there's no, if it's not written in the star that there's an encumbrance on the properties, you cannot collect from any of the properties. How even them, the ones that were sold after the loan. However, Chachamim say never return it because there's always a third party involved. Why? Shebezin the Freiman, even if it's not omitted, the law is if there's a contract, you can go collect the properties. Clearly, so that's Agamei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabban and Rabbi generally is Rabbi Yehuda. So the question in our mission is Reish Rabbi Yehuda says that the ksuva has to be exact, can't be minimized at all. And the safer seems to be Rabbi Yehuda. I want that if you didn't mention achrayis the chasim, it's still automatically an encumbrance on the properties. How does that work? You're going to tell me no. The entire mission of mayor, but the mayor holds a difference between a ksuva and all other starters. All other starters, you have to specifically include a lien on the property, otherwise it doesn't happen. When it comes to ksuva, as we said in our mission, it's a t'nai bezin. It's not something that I volunteered to pay. The bezin foisted upon me these rules, so therefore it's as if also there's a lien on the property. It's all part of the t'nai bezin, maybe. So he says, no, Mishainle, no, there's no such thing. Because Tanya, we clearly learn there are 5 people that can only collect from the free, unencumbered estate, but any property that was sold, they cannot collect from. And you cannot go to them shabadim not at all. And what are they? They hate the following: paid is v'shavah. Paid is, let's say, if somebody stole a property and unsold it to somebody, the stolen property, and the person who bought it, innocent person bought it. Later on, the victim comes and takes the property back. Then the person who bought it goes back to the Ganav to get reimbursed. He can also collect for the produce that he had prepared for this year, and then now he lost it, and also all the investment, the fertilizer and everything else that he put into the field, and all the money he put in, he can collect back. The paid and the shavah paid. All of laws in his benishter. Somebody took upon himself to feed his the son of his wife or Basish, the daughter of his wife, and let's say he doesn't have enough money, he cannot go to the people that he sold fields to take the fields back in order to feed these kids because there's no shibud on them. And why not? Because anything that doesn't have a fixed amount alone is $100. So the buyer of the field could say $100. I know he has it, but these are costs that have no limit. There's no cap on them. You continue giving to the child. Who knows what the cost will be? And there's no shibud because a buyer cannot avoid it in any way, cannot protect himself in any way from it. Anything that has no kitzur, no fixed amount, there's no shibud on it. The get, the get, and get is a regular star. We call every star a get, even though Tais in the beginning of Gittin says a get is 12, Gimel test is 3 and 9 is 12, and that's why a get is, when you write a get today, it's 12 lines in a get, as if when we say get, generally we mean a divorce, but the word get really means a contract. We can include any contract. The get chayv, a contract of a loan. She'ein ba achrayis, if it's no achrayis mentioned there, and it says a ksuvas isha and a ksuva wife. She'ein ba achrayis. So it says clearly here that a star chayv that has no achrayis, you cannot go to Shabbatim, and it includes a ksuva. So we see there's no difference in ksuva and a star. And who do you think the author of the price is? Of course, it's Amir. Man Shama who's going to say if you admit it, you cannot automatically assume that there's a lien on the property. Maybe, and it's including ksuva isha. So it goes back to our Mishnah. What's going on here? How can our Mishnah be a maid and a Yehuda? So we have 2 answers. Ibay same but a maid, Ibay same Rabbi Yehuda. If you want to tell Mishnah a maid, if you want to tell Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda. Ibay same Rabbi Yehuda, tell Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda. Hosm over there, Kostel over there, you wrote. He's Kabalti. Over there, he says clearly, I received from you $100. What do you call it? So if Rabbi Yehuda says that since you wrote, it wasn't Michael. He wrote a receipt. I received from you $100, but and therefore I mean, what do you call it? It doesn't work. Over here, like kabalti. Over here, what do you call it? Over here, it's all Rabbi Yehuda. But in our first part of the mission, the reason why you have to give the full $200 is because she did not write a receipt on the first part. I received $100 of it. You were assuming that she was Michael. Therefore, it doesn't work. Why? Because in this case, why doesn't it work? Because in this case, she said it relied on Bezin. Bezin said you got to give me $200. If she clearly wrote, I accept, I mean that $200. I'm Michael. She said as if I received $100. So clearly, she's not relying on the Bezin. She's saying I don't mind $100. Here, she said nothing. You said to her, I'm giving 100 instead of 200. She said nothing. So therefore, it doesn't work, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, because she can be relying on the Tanai Bezin and didn't bother. So then Rabbi Yehuda made in this case that this deviation is not valid. You have to pay the full law. My chayiv, when it says that you are chayiv, over here the Tani is min hamachorarin. that if you did not write Achraya Sefer, it says you have to pay the full amount, doesn't mean that you can go to the purchasers, it means to the husband. You can take from his unencumbered estate the full $200. Like Kosel, if he didn't write it, I'm going to go to Shmuel, very interesting thing. Father Shmuel said, if the wife of Israel was raped, Asura Labaila, still she's forbidden to her husband. Now, we always learned that if a woman is raped, she can go back to her husband. He comes along the big chiddush that if she was raped, even to Yisrael, he cannot go back for a new reason. He believes in the concept, we have worry, we suspect, maybe initially she was raped, but after a while she decided to continue with this person. Start out an oinus, but then turn out to be beratzah. We always say that if it's an oinus, she can go back to her husband. The Gemara will say later, that's talking about what we know it was an oinus because she was screaming the whole time. She never ever gave in to him until the very end. But in a normal case, sometimes because there's a possible suspicion that's what happened, therefore she cannot go up to her husband. Rav himself asked the question of Shmuel. It says in our Mishnah, if you get kidnapped, taken captive, it'll take you back as a wife. Clearly, you can take it back as a wife. We're not saying tchilos it's only the Sefer. Ishtik, he was quiet. Rav said regarding Father Shmuel, Sodim Otzim Milim, that these officers, they are limited in words, they seal the word, but Kafi seal the pin, they cover the mouth. In other words, why did you answer? You could have, Rav, who asked the question, said, Rav, you could have answered the question. You know what Shmuel could have answered? Abu Shmuel could have answered, B'shvuya Kila. Because he wouldn't know for a fact that anything happened. We're assuming that they raped her. And then we're making another assumption that at the end she was desirous. That's two assumptions. That's too much. He could have answered. That's why she's permitted to go back. But if we know for a fact that she was raped, maybe there's a chash, a suffix. Who knows? Maybe she's beratzah. How can the Torah said that if an oynish can go back to her husband? What's that talking about? The witnesses say she was shouting from the beginning to the very end. The Rava, and this argues with the Rava. Father Shmuel argues with the Rava because Rava says, even she says. Rava says, if it started out by Einas, even if it turned to Ratzon, that Ratzon is called an Einas Dika Ratzon. She would never have volunteered it at the beginning. It's only now in a frame of mind. She's not thinking straight. And her Yetzirah kicked in. That's like being provoked. And you provoke, that's a whole different story. The entire thing comes under the umbrella of Einas. Even if Rava says, she says, Hanichali, don't save me. Even if this wouldn't have happened, I would have come to him anyway. I love him. I would have hired him. Muteres, she's permitted. My time of why we say Yetzer Alba. So we say it's totally not a fault, she's not thinking straight, but Yetzer Hara took over. No, it's Chilasa Ba'ainis, it's considered the whole thing is an Ainis. Argues with Abu Shmuel. Tani goes over, like Rabba, the Hila need Fasa, it says in the Pasik, and she wasn't forced, the person was there and seduced her, and she wasn't forced, and so on. Yeah, so that she can't go back to her husband. It said he and she, limited, what do you mean he, she? As if there are other cases where that she's permitted, even if she wasn't forced, she can go back to her husband. What's that? If let's say she was raped, she's mutter. But the there's another woman, even though she wasn't raped, mutter, she's permitted. The age is what's that? Started out by but turned out to be beratzon, she can still go back to her husband. Tanidach, for talking about this pasuk vihi, we're going to have two other drashas from the word vihi. We look at another brayse vihi lined fasa. She wasn't forced. Then asura she cannot go back to her husband. Hanit fasa, but if she was forced, muteda she permitted. The yeshloch ached is another woman. Afa pishinit fasa, even though she was forced. Asura, there's a woman that if she was forced, she's asa. Who's that? The Eizazu, Eishes Kohen, the wife of a Kohen. Even if she was raped, unfortunately, she cannot go back to her husband. That's drasha number 2. Drasha number 3. The he landed fasa. She wasn't forced. Asuda, she cannot go back to her husband. Honey fasa. She was forced. Mutedes, admitted. The yeshlach is another woman. Even though she wasn't forced. Mutedes. The ezu. What is that? She kedusha tois. When she's permitted, even though she wasn't forced. If it turned out to be that the kedusha was made on a condition and condition was never met, which means retrospectively she was never married. And if she's never married, even Shafila ben Amukok said she has a child a couple of years later. He was supposed to do something within 5 years. He never did it. Then the marriage never a marriage, and therefore she was a free woman, a single woman. So even though she was mazana willingly, she did not commit adultery. She can walk out. Amar says, Hani Noshi, these women, the Ganvaganve, these women that were taken off by thieves, they were raped. They can go back to the husbands because obviously they were forced. We see that these women, they bring bread and they serve these ganavim. So it sounds like they're in love. Machmazira, they're doing out of fear, nothing else. Well, they're helping them out in the weapons, in the arrows. Machmazira, again, all out of fear. And that syndrome that if you're taking my captive there for long enough, you start thinking like them as well. But what one case we will agree with you. If they say to them, you can go back to your husbands, and then they come back on their own, I see them. They left and they come back, then that's already they entered their own voluntarily, and they came on their own. Tell me, learned Shvuyim Malchus, if they were kidnapped by a king, they're treated like they are kidnapped, no, by force, because there's no way they can think they can ever marry the king. So therefore, definitely they're like raped. But Gunova is listed, but if they were kidnapped by robbers, then it's part there aren't so many people taken captive, and she thinks they'll have a good life, and maybe she willingly wants to live with the guy. Ain't like a shvuin, they're not treated like shvuin, not treated like kidnapped, and therefore she's ushered to her husband, because maybe she thinks that she can end up marrying this guy and have a good life. But Tanya will learn Ibchad all the way around. More explains. Malchus and Malchus like Kasha. When it comes to kingdom and kingdom, one place it says that she's taken captive, that she's ushered to husband, place is mutter, not Kasha. Hobbin Malchus, very much a large kingdom. Then there's no way in the world she can convince herself that she's the one who's going to get married to him. Therefore, she was raped. Like Achashverosh. Hobbin Malchus ben Netzer. This is a robber who took over seized a few counties and provinces. And here, much less captives. She can convince herself, delude herself that she will be able to marry the guy if she's nice to him. So therefore, she might have been a willing participant, and she's us the husband. Least is a list of Lakasha, robber like Kasha. Hubba ben Netzer. Here we're talking about a robber like Ben Netzer over there. She can convince herself she can marry the guy. And Hubba listed down stamp crooks who don't really own anything. She's not really interested in getting married to the guy, and therefore she is raped. So the mother Ben Netzer, what's going on here? Hasam Karli Melech. First you call him a king, and Vahacha Karli you call him a robber. So yes. Gabi if you compare him to Achashverosh, list was a robber. Gabi list him down if you compare him to ordinary robbers. Melech was like a king because he owned a few provinces. We'll stop here. We'll continue tomorrow. Everyone have a good day.